that's becoming more and more of a foreign concept, especially to Christians in this country. I think the evolutionary mindset and the assumptions behind evolution, that it's so naturalistic, is behind all that. That's something that lends itself to that. It's influencing them. The other thing you have is that Christians who believe, okay, God did create everything, or some of us believe he restored everything in Genesis chapter 1. I believe all that. I believe there's a holy God that's out there. He's responsible for it. But when it comes to someone who maybe might be an atheist, they might be very well educated, when it's all said and done, they have a tough time articulating the arguments against evolution. And even though what the other person believes is a total lie, simply because they're much more well-educated and well-versed on the facts, they can make a convincing case for evolution. That's how so many people get, I believe, unfortunately, duped into it, because it sounds convincing. You know, it's like what Solomon was saying, you know, when you hear one side of the argument, it sounds great until you hear the other side, you know. Yeah. And so what happens is, unfortunately, they only hear one side of this thing in the schools, when they watch television, when they look at media, when they read a lot of books. You know, for example, Arthur C. Clarke's classic 2001: A Space Odyssey and his follow-up 2010 had nothing but evolutionary underpinnings in it. Nothing but evolution. Yet, in fact, the entire crux of the story was basically that man had been evolving, I guess, by these alien beings who have been assisting him, and ultimately he was going to evolve into this godlike super being from monkeys to a god, basically. That's where it was going. So you have this sort of thing that's out there, and a lot of people have bought into it. So what I was just going to talk about, as briefly as possible, just go through some very simple explanations for some of the evidence that's out there against evolution and for creation. And it's simple as it is. I think you'd be very surprised at how many people really don't know this stuff. They're not being taught this stuff. They're not being taught. You know, I praise God, like I said on last time, that I'm in a ministry led by a mighty man of God who teaches us these things. We learn about it in Bible study, for example. But unfortunately, a lot of people are not learning that. So the hope is to get this material out there and to do it in such a way that it's simple enough for everybody to grasp it and be able to use it when they really need it, because it's so important. Basically, what I was just going to go through, a guy by the name of Hank Hanegraaff, he wrote a book called The Face That Exposes the Farce of Evolution. So he took the evidence against evolution and for creation and divided up into 4 simple parts. And I'm just going to go through those very, very briefly, and then I'm going to back up and kind of go through them. And, of course, you know, if you want to jump in with questions, you know, and we go in whatever direction, please do. Okay, but basically what he did is he took face, F-A-C-E, face, and he subdivided those into 4 basic subpoints. Face, F, fossil evidence, A, ape men, C, chance, and E, entropy, okay? And basically what he said, and I'm going to summarize it real briefly right here, that there's no evidence in the fossil records to make a case for evolution at all. There's nothing there. And this is also cross-referenced with other great books. There's a great book called Creation by a guy named Grant Jeffrey. I mentioned the Evolution Handbook by Vance Farrell. These guys, as well as a host of other things that are out there on the computer and that sort of thing, you can actually testify to the fact that there's no fossil evidence for evolution. Now, a lot of people might find that quite shocking, especially if you saw Jurassic Park, you know, this sort of thing. You know, you might think, hey, man, there's got to be something out there saying that, you know, these guys evolved into birds and stuff. That's absolute foolishness. They made all that up. That's just a belief that some scientists had, and they just perpetuate and propagate that stuff as if that's the truth. It's not the truth at all.
Well, it sells their books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's good material that's out there, and I think the powers that be want that sort of thing out there to keep the people deceived, so they don't understand when it's all said and done. There's no fossil evidence whatsoever for it. The letter A is ape men. Now, this one's even a greater joke than the fossil evidence that they supposedly have. Basically, there's been no such thing as ape men, that is intermediates from actual apes, primates going to humans out there. Now, you know, if you've seen the little specials on TV and that sort of thing, they have a little chart showing you how it went from an ape man to a human. That's an artist's imagination. That's
You're
science
right.
fiction.
It's an imagination. That's true.
Total imagination. But when you look in a science text, what you'll find, ma'am, is you'll actually find that they have drawings of these supposed cavemen, these Neanderthals, all this sort of thing. They have Java Man in there. These are sculptures and designs totally fabricated by artists. Next you have C, which is chance, and the likelihood of the fact that all human life, as well as all life as we know it, coming from this primordial soup that kind of accidentally generated life thousands or even millions and millions of years ago, is sheer nonsense. The likelihood that that happened is absolutely nil. There's no statistics to back it up. And finally, the law of entropy. Entropy basically states in so many words that things tear down, break down, mess up over time.
Yeah.
Well, basically, if you're going to embrace the theory of evolution, you have to throw out entropy. And entropy runs contrary to evolution, and it is impossible to embrace entropy and evolution at the same time. So that's basically FACE, F-A-C-E, in a nutshell. But I'll kind of go back and go through, first of all, the fossil record. You know, when you look at this thing, what these guys are saying is that if evolution is true, then there should be intermediate fossils going from one species to another one. You know, the whole thing where we went from, in evolutionary thought, from these little amoebas, the simple cell creatures, to the polywogs. Then they became amphibian like frogs, and then they got out of out of the water, and then they start walking around, and their tails fell off and this sort of thing, and so they eventually grew into men. Well, this is absolute foolishness. There's no documentation to back it up whatsoever. Even Charles Darwin, when he wrote on Origin of Species, he himself had to clearly admit there had been no intermediate fossils found to go from one species to the next one. He gave some outlandish claim that he knew that they had not found it, but eventually they would find these intermediate species, and he actually made the claim that he believed that the reason why they hadn't found them, for example, on the western hemisphere of the Earth is because what happened was all the evolution took place on the eastern side, that the animals migrated to the east, went through their evolutionary changes, and came back to the west. This is the kind of foolishness that they use to try to explain why they can't find one single solitary intermediate fossil to go from one phase to the next.
You know, that is just plain silly.
It is. It's
that
absolutely
they went
ridiculous.
all the way to one side and then came back to the... That's just... Somebody's been smoking some funny stuff to come up with something like that.
Yeah, these guys are supposed to be the philosophers who are the founding fathers, for lack of better words, of modern evolutionary theory.
Oh my gosh.
Most of they're paleontologists. Those are guys who actually study the fossil record. They will freely admit, hey, we went into this thing trying to prove evolution. We didn't even take into consideration that there might not be any intermediate fossils. We just went in there looking for it, and we haven't found it yet. 150 years, millions of fossils have been recovered all over the world. Not one single shred of proof that one species evolved into another. And I told you last time I was with you that basically it was proven right around the turn of the last century that that's impossible anyways. You can't do that naturally. Of course, you can engineer it and make it happen, but that won't happen given the actual scientific facts. And that goes right in line with what God said in Genesis chapter 1. He said, let them produce or reproduce after their own kind. And so he sealed it by his word once and for all that they couldn't do that. And if you tamper with it, of course, you can make them do that sort of thing. For example, lions and tigers don't normally mix, but they can actually engineer that thing so that they can make what they call a liger or something like this, some freak of nature that's hundreds of pounds, a massive animal that they splice the genes of a tiger with a lion. But even that close, you know, within the cat family like that, they don't mix simply because one is one thing and one is the other thing, and they don't come together. But, you know, you have people buying into this thing wholeheartedly, not realizing that, and they don't understand that, for example, most scientists will unanimously agree in microevolution. Microevolution is when you have species or a family of animals, and they basically break off into derivatives. So, for example, you have the canine family, right? And basically you have like the wolf, and you'll have all kinds of varieties of dogs, you know, from the little tiny